So I've encountered some nasty road chips on the windscreen, which I'll show you shortly. There'll only be one what's imminent because I've actually cured and fixed two of them already, but I just thought this would be useful. The one I actually have left to do is the worst chip going. It's quite deep and quite comprehensive. It's quite compounded, so quite an impact. So I'm going to just show you how I'm going to fix this with a standard windscreen repair kit. I'm not going to show the brand of it. It's just an everyday standard one you can buy from most car shops. So it's not a paid sponsored site this or anything. It's not going to be affiliated, so I'm not going to put a link to it. It's just purely this is what I've done with a particular brand of repair kit for the windscreen. Just thought it might be useful. So that black dot in the near centre of the picture is the nasty stone chip. We actually obtained that one on our recent trip up north. So just spending a bit of time to do some repairs. So I've cleaned the windscreen, so it's nice and clean, nice and dry. It's not in direct sunlight, it's in the shade. So as per the instructions, so I'm going to now just do it in little stages, filming it, and you can see what I've done and see the finished results once it's complete. So nice and clean, nice and dry. I'm going to put a clamp over it, over the area what's affected. The actual cylindrical rod what you place over it in regards to the clamp itself, that's going to be more or less central to the affected area, and then I will put a rod in there which is a reservoir, and you put a few drops of this resin, then you put a sealing cap on top of that, let it set for about 4 to 6 minutes I think it says. It's not exactly setting, it's just getting into the actual damage, and then you put a curing strip onto it, put it into daylight, let it cure for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then that's it. You just cure, you just clean off that cured resin, the residue of that, and then you should have a nice looking windscreen. So you've seen the before. I can't really get very close up to it because it's very high in the cabin, from the outside that is, and if I get too close I don't think it shows it actually, so I think the image that I had was as close as possible. So you'll see the next sort of steps. I'm doing it step by step. So I've positioned that clamp as central as possible as I can be over that impacted area, and then now I'm going to put the centre column in and also the resin, and then the reservoir resin locking nut I think they call it. So I've screwed this in first, which is the holder for the resin. That one there, the top one, that's actually the locking mechanism to actually then seal that resin onto the actual impacted area. So hopefully you can see in the centre now where I've locked both those locking nuts up. So the first one I showed you was the locking nut for the reservoir, which basically puts a seal to the windscreen, and then once you've got that flush, you don't need to over tighten them, but you just have them nice and flush. So then I put some drops of this resin in. It recommends 4 to 6 drops. I've gone 6 drops, with this being the worst of the stone chips I had. And then that secondary locking nut just causes a seal, a vacuum seal. And then you now, that second locking nut, you only just go, you don't go tight on, you just have it contacting. The actual central one I did first hand, the one with the resin, the reservoir one, I didn't quite have nipped up enough and there was a leakage, but then again you just nip it up then till the leaking stops, then you've got the right pressure. Then you don't tighten on that second nut too hard, you just go on just to get the air out, and hopefully you can see now that you can't actually see any real damage to that chip anymore, to the windscreen, that chip's almost gone. So you leave it now for 4 to 6 minutes, then drop on a curing strip, then you put it into sunlight for I think 10 to 15 minutes, let it cure hard on, and then after that you just scrape any debris, any residue off from that resin, and that should be that. So that's where we're at so far with this particular chip. So it's been about 5 minutes since I left that resin in. Then with the lock-in resin nut, I've released that after 5 minutes. Then I've reinserted it and put pressure on it again to make sure there's no air bubbles, any leakage. I've also nipped up the bottom nut, the first nut that contacts the actual windscreen and forms a seal. I had to nip that up a little bit more again because it was seeping a little bit of the resin. So you might see some residue just beneath, in between those two suckers. But now I'm going to leave it another 5 minutes, put a curing strip on there, and then just get the Winnebago Leisure Seeker Sprinter into some direct sunlight, and then let the whole thing cure. That's all 3 of the repairs I've done. Let them cure for 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes, and then I'll show you the finished results. You'll only see this main one here because the other 2 you didn't see before, but that's why I filmed this particular one. This was the worst one. So just around here, if you can see sort of some bubbling or some sort of film around there, that's where I had the previous chip. That's got the curing strip on there. Also bypassing what I'm fixing at the moment, and down and across, you see a film just here, possibly not, but there is some film which is again curing. It's a curing strip on there, and that was a previous chip. So this chip here, along with the top left hand corner of the windscreen as we sit inside the cabin, they were quite relatively minor chips. This one was the worst one. So I'm not expecting miracles. I don't expect it to look invisible, but I do expect it to fix it to some degree. So I reversed the Winnebago as far back as I can to get as much as direct sunlight as I possibly can, and with the overhang from above, I'm not going to get direct sunlight, but I think with the UV rays bouncing around and the heat, I think it's enough to cure it. Now, looking at as close as I possibly can again, that is where, just where my fingertip end is, that is where the actual damage was, if that makes sense. It's still damaged. I can still see like a fine spider leg or spider look to it, but it's not as heavy duty as it was before. I doubt it'll pick it up on camera. The GoPro's not very good at actually zooming in on things. So you'll have to just take my word for it for now that the curing strip is on, and I'll probably leave it about half an hour, and then I will take the curing strips off, clean them up a bit, the actual residue of the resin, and then show you again. That'll be the final results. So where I'm pointing just there is where the damage was, and there's a fine like spider mark there now, so it's not perfectly clear. But definitely an improvement. Over here, where I'm pointing to, is where there was some damage previously, and that's pretty clear. That was more of a shallow indentation though. And likewise, there's another one here, which again I can see but an improvement again. So overall, it was definitely worth doing. That again. It was definitely worth doing, and at least it strengthened that area. So if it gets another chip around that mark, hopefully it doesn't spread as much, and hopefully no need to replace the windscreen as yet. Thanks for watching this. Hopefully it helps somebody.